to me, lending new weight to her accounts. My grandparents' conversations about camps, whose names I could not recall, also conveyed a different kind of knowledge. My most vivid memory is not a particular story my grandparents related, but the shame I felt about my own contribution to one such discussion. I must have been around 10 years old when my paternal grandmother, Rosie, was speaking of the dangers that awaited inmates who tried to communicate between blocks in a concentration camp. Curious to understand why they had not resisted, I inquired whether barbed wire had divided the barracks. After she said no, I started wondering aloud why she and her fellow prisoners had not snuck into each other's blocks. I still remember the blank stares and embarrassed silence in the room before they returned to their conversation. I understood immediately that they considered my question thoughtless, a reflection of my youth and the fact that I had learned about violence only from Hollywood action movies. These moments of painful miscommunication contained their own essential lessons. Knowing what to say, what to ask, and when to remain silent allows us to strengthen familial and communal bonds of trust and understanding. I see my students experience something similar as they are socialized into the academic community, sometimes learning about good questions by watching others ask theirs, sometimes learning by trial and humiliating error. In the process, they also realize that the questions that prevail in one community can appear inappropriate in another. In recent decades, scholars of the Holocaust have turned their attention to experiences of sexual violence during the war, for example. I cannot begin to imagine what my grandparents' reaction would have been if someone had raised the topic at a family gathering. Yet the scholarly community has long had its own taboos, which were not necessarily shared by their historical subjects. After the war, many survivors felt comfortable talking about their desire for revenge, even as historians were largely unwilling to broach such themes. As I reflect on my own process of learning new questions, I suspect that the issues I raise in the following chapters represent a departure from what my grandparents would have considered sensible topics. In this book, I explore relations between Jewish and Romani victims of Nazism during the Holocaust, as well as their attempts to come to terms with their parallel fates ever since. These relations were often distant, unequal, and full of hurtful misunderstandings. I do not know what my grandparents thought of Roma because I cannot recall anyone speaking of them on those Sunday afternoons. The people they would have called gypsies simply never came up. I cannot say whether my grandparents did not talk about them because they did not encounter Roma in the years of persecution and destruction, or whether they lacked a framework within which to remember and convey these experiences. Did they lack words, chronologies, and connections that would have given meaning to any interaction they might have had with Roma? Whatever the answer, their silence on this topic was not unusual. Despite the fact that Jews played an outsized role in the struggle to recognize and conserve stories of Romani suffering during the war, most Jews, including Jewish Holocaust survivors such as my grandparents, expressed little interest in the topic. The same can be said of my other communities, scholars of the Jewish past and of the Holocaust. While historians of the Holocaust have started to deal with the Romani genocide, they have mostly studied the actions of the perpetrators rather than the lives of the Romani victims. This largely comes down to a problem of expertise and method, as I have experienced myself. Wading into the field of Romani history has thrust me into the position of